So, welcome back to the Kids to Love podcast. I've invited one of our Kids to Love alumni, Willie Reeves, on with us. And of course, if you've been around Kids to Love really at any time, I think I know I have just watched you grow up over the last 24 years. So, let's kind of go back for those maybe who don't know your connection and the first time that you heard about us, that we were a part of your life, because it's been a minute.
Yeah, so that's a great introduction. It happened many years ago. I was around the age of 8, and I was trying to get adopted. And I believe you were doing, adoption segments on the news. And I got selected, and they said, "Hey, would you like to come to the McWayne Center in Birmingham?" I was like, "I would love to go to the McWayne Center in Birmingham." So we went up there and, we did a segment about me, kind of told people who I was and things like that. I remember for lunch, we had McDonald's brought to us for lunch. And you gave me half of your cheeseburger, which I thought was really nice. And then from there, I kind of saw the segment ad, and I was like, "Hey, I'm on TV for the first time." So it was a pretty cool experience, and like I said, I was around the age of 8 at the time. So I'm in my mid-30s now, so, about 24 years. That's how we started.
So, how old were you when you first came into foster care?
So when I first came into care, I was 3.5, and I aged out when I was 21. So I emancipated a week before my 21st birthday.
And in that 18 years, how many homes were you in for 17 years?
That's a great question. So I did the calculations as I was coming over, and it was 23 total,
Wow.
but 25 in all, because I bounced around to some of them twice.
Mm-hmm.
So 25 total.
That's a lot of moving, a lot of instability for a child. What is that like?
Well, when I was younger, I really didn't understand what was going on. It was just like, it became normal for me. That was the only thing that was consistent, was change, unfortunately. And so when I was younger, I really didn't understand what foster care was. Most of the homes I stayed in had a male and a female, so I would have like a mother figure and a father figure in the home. But around the age of 11, I transitioned into group homes. And with the group homes, it was completely different, because I went from having, a singular foster parent that kind of oversaw everything, to consistent staff moving in and out. And I was in there sometimes with anywhere from 15 to 20 other youth, who some were my age, some were older, some were younger. So then it kind of started to dawn on me what being in the system really was at that age. And that was a huge transition to go from being in a foster home to a group home. That was a really eye-opening experience.
One of the questions, we just in another podcast, we were talking about that, of, kind of frequently asked questions that people have. And one of the questions that they ask is how we decide on services and things like that. And one of the things I shared was, when we were starting Davidson Farms, a group home, because everything I'd ever heard about a group home was exactly how you just described it, which wasn't a home. It was a facility. And so, that's when I leaned out on several of our alumni to say, how do we make this different? How do we make this better? And your experience in a group home was a key part of how we try to do Davidson Farms better, because if we don't learn from the mistakes of our past, how can we expect anything to change? So I want you to know that while I hate that that's what you had to go through, your story is power, and that has been instrumental in us trying to do it better, trying to do it different, which is exactly everything that we do. So let's fast forward a little bit of when So we first connected when you were 8,
Hmm.
and then we connected again when you were how old?
When I was 22, getting ready to be 23. And that connection kind of was an unexpected connection. I had kind of hit rock bottom in my life, and I reached out to Foster Care to Success, which, if you're familiar with, the ETV grants that the youth can get. They're the ones who kind of oversee that, and so I had developed a great relationship with them. I actually went to their AIM Hire program, and I reached out to the coordinator, and I was like, "Hey, look, I've fallen on hard times. I'm getting ready to be out on the streets in 2 or 3 days. What we got?" And they're like, "Oh, let us make some phone calls." And they called me back, and they said, "We found 2 places. One of them is in Missouri." And I was like, "I really don't want to leave the state." They was like, "The other one is in Huntsville." And I was like, "Are you familiar with Huntsville?" I was like, "It gets cold up there," but I was like, "I'm on board." And I was like, "Hey, the application deadline for this program actually ended yesterday, but they're going to let you put in an application anyway." And so I'm trying to figure out, I don't have internet, didn't have really good service on my phone. So I was walking around trying to find some public Wi-Fi in Montgomery. And I found some Wi-Fi. I logged in. I did the application. I know I misspelled a ton of words on the application, and I hit submit. And they were like, "Hey, they want to bring you up for an interview." I was like, "That's great. I don't have a way to get to Huntsville." And they were like, "Don't worry about it. We're going to get you a bus ticket. We're going to put you on a Greyhound." Eileen, who was the CEO, Foster Care to Success, she said, "Hey, we're going to get you a hotel." She was like, "Don't worry about anything." And woke up that morning at like 2 o'clock in the morning, hopped on a Greyhound, and I made it to the Holiday Inn. That's right down the street from Kids to Love. And that's where the journey started again.
I remember when Willie came on our radar and we needed to get you here, and I had to provide the bus ticket. And so Beverly on our team that we'll be talking about, you've met her and we know her. You'll be hearing more about Beverly because Beverly was a key piece in Willie's journey. I told Beverly, I said, "I need you to take the money to this homeless shelter in Montgomery and give it to Willie." And she said, "Have you lost your mind?" And I said, "No." And she's like, "Well, how will I know him?" And I said, "Well, so I think I connected y'all so y'all could coordinate." And I said, and what was so crazy is when you came back on the radar, like I remembered you, So it's like I don't know. To me, it was just this. We got to figure this out. So we get you here. You get to the hotel. You come in for the interview, and I remember the team said, "How lenient do we need to be with this young man?" Because what we had really established with K-Tech is math scores had to be a certain, competency had to be a certain. And while we were setting the rules and we had the ability to be flexible, we also were trying to build a credible program. And so I said, "I want him interviewed like every other candidate." And I said, "But I just also want you to understand this could change his life." So I'm like, no pressure, but. And I remember I purposely didn't sit in that interview because I wanted them, I trusted the team to do their job. And I remember there were several of them came out, and there was one that never cried, and she was crying. And we all knew that this could be the difference between you truly being homeless, you making choices that you would have to make to be desperate for survival that none of us wanted you to make, that we didn't want you to be another statistic. So you came, you interviewed for K-Tech, and I remember it was the 1st of December, and it was really, really cold when you came. And he didn't have a coat on. And I said, "Where's your coat?"
I get asked that, still to this day, because I normally don't get cold. But she asked, where's my coat? I had on a windbreaker, and to give you an idea of how cold it was, it was around the temperatures that we've experienced the last couple of weeks. It was really cold, but I really wasn't concerned about a jacket at the time. And I remember, we met. You asked me where my jacket was, and you asked me what size I wore. And, I told you wasn't thinking anything of it. And I remember you had one of your biological kids, they had a, birthday that was coming up or maybe had already passed. And, they were like, hey, for my birthday, went out and got you a jacket. And, I still have that jacket and it hangs up in my closet, just as a reminder of, where I came from. So that was a neat reintroduction to each other.
So I remember one of the hardest things I had to do was pick you up from the hotel and take you back to the bus stop. So this was in December. K-Tech wasn't starting until January, and we didn't have a place for you to live yet. And so I remember I called Beverly, and I said, if you can take care of him during Christmas and activate your network of people, that then gives us time to get him set up here. And so I put you back on that bus, sending you back to a homeless shelter, and that was so hard for me to do. And anyway, but Beverly stepped up, and so she just stepped right in and filled that gap. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, she did. And ironically, I get back to Montgomery. I'm getting off of the Greyhound, and I have to take a taxi, back to the facility. And I get back to the facility, and, a little bit about the facility, just to give you an idea of where I was living at. It was consistent smoking, and I'm not a smoker. So was having to consistently battle secondhand smoke, was having to battle, roaches. I always make a joke that, they were the type of roaches that when you turn on the light, they would turn around and look at you like you were coming into their house, And so I would sleep with a flashlight to try to keep them away because they didn't like light. And I would sleep with a shoe so that, I could have something to just hit them off me. So that's kind of the situation I was in. And so I get back, and Beverly calls me because when you sent me away, you make sure that you was going to have a way to communicate with me. So you said, hey, here's some minutes for your phone. Make good use of it. And Beverly calls me, and she says, hey, is there anything that you need? I was like, no, I'm fine unless you have, a spare house. And she was like, really? She was like, just so happened I do. I was like, really? She was like, yeah. She was like, my husband and I, we have, rental properties, and unfortunately we just evicted someone. So she was like, if you don't mind, sleeping on the futon. I was like, as long as there's not roaches. And, a day later, she says, hey, I'm downstairs. And I really hadn't packed up a ton of my clothes. I just packed up enough because I was like, I got to get up out of here. And we left and got in the car, and, she took me to the rental property. On the way to the rental property, I was like, I need to wash my clothes. I haven't washed clothes in some time. And she was like, oh, I'll take your clothes home and wash them. I was like, I'm not going to do this to you. I was like, I don't know what's going to fall out of these clothes. I was like, it may be roaches. It may be cigarettes. I was like, I would just feel comfortable at going to a laundromat. So I remember she went and got me a roll of quarters, and she dropped me off at the laundromat. She was like, just let me know when you're done. I'll come by and pick you up. And she came by, washed my clothes and everything, came by. And, we went to the loft, and she was like, so what do you think? I was like, this is great. And she was like, so, I've been, talking to some people, and she was like, tomorrow, got you a job. She was like, if you're up for it. I was like, absolutely, because I hadn't had a steady job in quite some time. So I was really happy, excited about that. And then, another friend of hers reached out and was like, hey, I own a donut shop. He's welcome to come make donuts with us. And so I was able to get another job at a donut shop. And one of the churches she was affiliated with down there kind of just opened their arms and just took me in as if I was one of their own. They're like, hey, we want them to come to church. We want to give them a great Christmas. Whatever you need, just let us know. And so, things started to rapidly snowball once, I was under Beverly's wings. And
It's amazing how things happen like that, isn't it?
just snowballed. And I had no idea, what was going on up here, the calls that she was making and things like that. I was just happy to be out the Roach Motel. And I remember the gentleman, they came and picked me up the next morning because he owned a lawn care service. So I went out and picked up some leaves and did some lawn care work. And he was a member of the church. I didn't know that at the time, but he was a member of the church. And, really nice guy. I was like, yeah, this is probably my last job because it's December, so there's not really a lot of lawn care that was going on. He was like, I'll see you at church on Sunday. I was like, great. And so, got to go to church on Sunday and was able to get a really good Christmas. And Beverly, she kind of was like, hey, I'm going to come by and pick you up to take you back up for K-Tech. And I was just like, because I was worried, like, how am I going to get up here? She was like, oh, don't worry about it. We got it taken care of, with a smile. And like I said, I had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. And as we got in the car to come up here, it was her and her husband. And I asked her, I said, hey, do you mind if we go run by, and get the rest of my stuff? And she looked at me and she said, do you really want to go back and get it? And I was like, you know what? The way she said it, I was like, nah, I don't. It's kind of like a starting fresh, a new beginning. So I said no. Yeah, I said, I'm happy. Because she was like, you got a suitcase full of clothes, and she was kind of alluding to there was more to come. And so we hopped in the car, and we made our way back up here to Huntsville.
So we're going to show you the video of what we were doing when Willie was down in Montgomery, Wetumpka area during Christmas. Our team was here. There is an apartment complex that's within, just right up the street. So we knew if we could get you a place there, then that would cover transportation and housing. And then we lined up the job at Kroger when you got back. But we're just going to dip in and let you watch a little bit of that video when Willie moved back to Huntsville in January of, remember what year that was?
Oh, that was 9 years ago now. So that was 2016, 17, somewhere
Sounds
there.
about right. Yeah. So take a look at this.
So he came in December and interviewed for K-Tech and met our requirements. And so over the last 3.5 weeks, our extended family, Wetumpka and Montgomery, have been taking care of him. I said, if you can take care of him for 3 weeks, just give us time to get him a place here. So we, the foundation, because of our amazing donors and supporters, have secured an apartment for Willie. I want you to understand the magnitude of this. You have someone who came into foster care at the age of 3, moved 23 different times while in foster care, got accepted at the University of Alabama, tried to go to college. He was capable of it, but it's hard to go to a school like that without a support system. So he dropped out of college, got a job, lost that job, he found himself homeless. People ask us, what do you do? We bring our team in for a day and decorate apartments and be able to give kids a chance, because the one thing that's keeping Willie from independence is education. And so he will be here tomorrow for the orientation of our next K-Tech class. So we're just real excited and can't wait till it gets here.
give us what was going on in your mind as you get back to Huntsville. Because, you know, like you said, you were used to change because you'd moved a lot, but it was a little bit different this time because you didn't have a safety net anymore.
Right.
And you knew, unfortunately, what rock bottom felt like at that point. So walk us through when you guys pulled back up.
Yeah, so when we pulled back up, they're like, so, this is where you're going to be staying. I was like, oh, yeah, these are nice and everything like that. What I didn't know was that, you were already on Facebook Live, going through what was finna transpire. And I remember seeing you walk towards me. And I was like, you were a familiar face. I was like, oh, hey, and you're like, all right, well, welcome, come, we're going to check it out. And then, kind of get to the apartment. And I want to say the entire Kids to Love team was waiting in the apartment. And, it was kind of like a welcome home moment. And I was just like, kind of blown away because I had no idea that it was happening. And, I was in my mind, I was kind of worried, like, okay, how am I going to get to, this program, where am I going to stay and all those type of things. And then it was just like, all of that was gone. Like the question was answered. It was like, hey, we stocked up the fridge. If you don't like it, let us know. You can go to Kroger. We've set you up with an interview at Kroger. It's within walking distance, so you'll be able to, walk to work. Unless it's raining, somebody come pick you up. And it was kind of just like a welcome home moment. And I was just like, okay. And I remember at the end, you're like, all right, so tomorrow's first day of K-Tech. I'm going to come by, pick you up, and, we're going to start the journey. And so looking back on that, it was an eye-opening experience. But in the video, if you look, I don't know if it was the lighting or, if it was just a sign, but, there were comments that was like, look, if you look closely into the light, you could see kind of like something watching over us, and I don't know if it was the way that we were standing or what it was, but, people in the comments were like, there's, some type of figure there. And, it just made it all, come to life. And, it was kind of a full circle moment. So, yeah, it was an experience, to say.
Yeah, it was a good day when you came back. It was a good day. So you started K-Tech, well within his wheelhouse of being successful. And then we get, how far in did we get? And because, do you remember, I remember we had a real frank conversation about what I was willing to do and then what the expectation was for you. And knowing your history of people that had consistently not followed through with you was very important for me to prove that I was going to be different. That was very important to me because I knew it was going to kind of be an uphill battle for you to be willing to trust me. So we get a couple weeks in the class, and Willie's real comfortable, and then like and you're doing great, and then you start to kind of, I don't know, what I say, the honeymoon time is over. And we see that a lot, especially with kids in foster care, if you're going to kind of start to see, okay, what are the boundaries? Is this going to work? Do you remember the day?
Oh, yeah, I remember it very vividly. It was a conversation, and you called me up to your office, and which was rare because you normally didn't call me up to your office. So sitting in your office, and I remember you looked at me and you said, I'm doing my part. Are you doing yours? And you was like, are you telling me that this is the best that you can do? And I was just like, no, it's not. And you were just like, I'm holding up to my end. I need you to hold up to your end. And so the next test that we took, I remember it, I made a 95 or 96 on it, somewhere in there. And after that, that's what the expectation was. It was, we know that you can do A-level work, right? And so one of the things about me is if you challenge me to do something, I'm going to rise up to the challenge. If you tell me I can't do something, it's just going to make me want to do it. And so, that was your way of saying, okay, show me that you want this opportunity. And after that, the instructor had been telling me, hey, you can challenge to be top in the class. I was like, you just telling me that because, you're my instructors. But after I made, that 96, that's what the expectation was. It wasn't, we know that your best work is A-level work. So even if you're sick, which I was for one test, we know that you can make A's. And so that's when I kind of had my aha moment was, okay, I can do this now, right? I've shown myself that I can do A-level work. And a lot of it had to do with, me and another classmate of mine, we like to joke, and, it was made apparent that we couldn't sit next to each other because, we just kept joking and, we were doing great work, but like, one of us was kind of voluntold not to sit next to the other. And of course, I was the one who was voluntold. So, I kind of sat in the front row of the class and, we both saw our grades improve once that happened. But yeah, I was able to, maintain that A average for the duration of the program. But, it took that little extra push. And sometimes when you push someone, you really don't know how they're going to respond, and sometimes they'll be reclusive and go into a shell. And sometimes, they'll take it to heart and really rise up. So, I'm glad I was able to accept the challenge.
Me too. Because, I think that's the thing. So many times we have people around us in life that see our potential long before we do. And that was what was so, that I was so frustrated because I'm like, you so have the ability to not just do this, but to do this well and to do this as an A student. And I wanted that for you, but you had to want it for you. Because me wanting it for you wasn't going to do it. But when you decided that you wanted it, when you have people in your life that are speaking success into you, and you can do this and you can be an A student, and then you become that because you had the potential all along, like that's totally your win. That's totally your win. And we were all high-fiving. And what I love is the dynamic went from, hey, I don't know that Willie's doing I don't think he's doing what he's capable of, to, let me tell you what Willie did today. Willie moved out of the way of a distraction and changed his seat. That was growth. That was maturity. Willie made a 96 on this test. I'm like, of course he did, because that's what the expectation, because you could do that. So I just look back now and just, I'm so proud of the work that you put in for you, and I'm so honored that we got to be just, a part of that journey, to be a safety net for you. So you finished K-Tech, and another one of those questions was what programs, that I answered earlier, was what programs do we have for youth aging out? And, of course, K-Tech is one of our biggest aging out solutions. What's the difference that K-Tech has made in your life?
Yeah. So since I was able to get the mechatronic certification, I have maintained a well-paying job from the time I received it until now. And it's a well-paying, jobs that are livable wages that I was able to do. Funny story, haven't shared this with you yet, but I had lunch 2 weeks ago with one of our biggest supporters, who was the plant manager at my first job. I'm not going to mention her name, but you know who it is. And they were telling me that back then, the question was asked, how can we get more kids or more people to believe in what we're doing here? And their response to you was, let Willie go talk. And I had just graduated, and they saw the vision and saw the potential in me then, to where their response was to, let Willie talk, let Willie share his story. That's how you're going to get more people to believe. And, they were a great ally back then. And I didn't even know that this conversation had happened. But for them, to see that kind of potential in me, when they told me that over lunch, I was like, that speaks volumes. And, I'm glad I was able to come in contact with them because, they've been a great, mentor over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I remember, because it's either you were doing good, or you weren't, but you would go radio silent on me. And so from time to time, I'm like, hey, just checking in. But and let me just say, I'm not going to cry with you today, dadgum you. Most holidays, I get a text, and means the world to me. Just means the world to me. But one of the ones that you sent that just, I lost it, was the day you sent me pictures of house keys.
Mm-hmm.
And the caption was from homeless to homeowner. Mm-hmm. And, just knowing, gosh, our journey has been the bulk of your life. And, our goal is to always be able to make a difference and meet our kids where they are. And, and that's what we've worked to do with you. But then you took that baton and you ran with it to be able to be so successful and to see the potential that we did. So, yeah, the picture with the keys, whew, you got me. You knew you would, though. He does it on purpose. So, what would you say to somebody that's out there that maybe is a donor that has sown a seed in your life and you never met them, the people that maybe paid the rent for your apartment, or those, that helped stock that refrigerator, all those come from the generosity of our community. What would you like to say to those people that invested in you?
I would say, first off, thank you for your investment. And I would say that, what you poured into me, I now get to pour back into, the next group that's coming up. One of the ways that I do that is, by coming back and sharing my story.
Because your story has power.
It does. And,
your story has power.
I spoke with you earlier this year about being inspired to start a mentor-mentee program for, K-Tech, just because speaking at the last graduation, all of the graduates came up to me after graduation and they were like, hey, let's exchange information. How do I go about getting into this industry? One of the students in particular was like, hey, I have a security clearance. This is the type of work I want to do. This is where I want to go. What advice do you have for me? And looking back on it, just thinking, okay, this is, that was year 10. So now we're entering year 11. And that means there's 10 years of experiences that we have out there that we can lean on, from the people who have gone through the program. And what better way to do that than, get a mentor-mentee program going. So I haven't forgot about it. It's still in the
He
works.
texted me. I said, I love it. Go forth and conquer. I love it. How do we land a plane of 20-plus years? I mean, how do we... What's another thing that sticks out for you?
Another thing that sticks out for me is that part of being, going through Kids to Love is everything that Kids to Love had to offer when I first went through K-Tech and what Kids to Love has to offer now, like the growth of Kids to Love, and I've had the joy of being a part of that. A lot of times I tell people you can see a commercial for, Save the Kids or Save the Animals and things like that, and you have no clue, where that investment is going, right? with Kids to Love, you see the investment, right? You see Kids to Love grow, right? For example, when I left K-Tech, the only thing that K-Tech had was the mechatronics program. Now they have Snap-on tools. They have the robotics lab. They have soldering. And this, center that we're in now, the Smith Wellness Center, that was a mere thought,
It's a parking lot.
That just shows you the growth. And as an alumni, I'm able to pour back in. I'm able to share my story, hopefully inspire those who may be on the fence, that, your gift matter, and it's always not monetary, come volunteer, gift, talents, things like that, and, pour back in, what was poured into you. And so that's been one of my big things. I love to come and volunteer. Usually during Christmas time, I normally buy presents for the kids. But this year I was able to, provide some muscle and be here for a good duration of Christmas.
Which was great because, we needed your help. And you were just, it was interesting. Jeff would say, well, I text Willie and Willie's come in and Willie this and Willie that. And I love that. First of all, I love your willingness to do it, but we needed that and we needed your support. And what I loved is I felt like we were there for you when you needed us. And then you're here for us when we needed you. And to me, that's beautiful.
Yeah, like I said, you poured into me, so now I get to pour back in. And, Jeff would text me and be like, hey, if you're not busy, could really use you. And I'm just like, tell me where you're at. And, he would drop the location and he would be like, we got 2,000 bikes we got to get moved. And I'm like, all right, let's get to it.
Let's get to it, yeah.
Let's get to it. And I was like, is it just the two of us? He's like, no, we got somebody that's writing down, what county the bikes are going to, and, we need to move them over here. I'm like, all right, come on, let's, always up for the challenge. And, it's always welcoming coming back to, no matter, who's still working or who's departed, it's always love. You put me in contact with Tasha and she was like, come on, and I had never physically met Tasha, come to find out, she was working, at the company that, helped move in the furniture into the apartment. She kind of shared that story. So, it's always, a lot of full circle moments happen. And, I've seen, a lot of the staff come and some of them have stayed, some of them have gone. And, it's always Kids to Love. So.
That's right. Our mission's the same, to meet the needs of kids. Well, I'm just so proud of you here. So proud of you. And thank you for your time. And, while his number might have changed a couple different times, mine hasn't. And you know that, and you always have it.
Right.
So, always. All right. To learn more about what we do, and now that you know the heart of why we do it, you can always log on to kidstolove.org for more information on the Mental Wellness Center that Willie mentioned. That's Hope for Trauma. And if you find yourself in the same path where Willie was and think that K-Tech might be a resource for you, we would love to have that conversation and welcome you. And that link is goktech.org. So we'll put all of this information on. Thanks for your time. We're so proud of you. Love you, mean it.
Love you. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.